used to think changing my life would happen all at once. One decision, one breakthrough. One morning I'd wake up and finally become the person I'd spent years trying to be. I believed that for a long time. Every Monday felt like another chance. I'd wake up a little earlier than usual, make a fresh cup of coffee, open a brand new notebook that still smelled like paper and ink. I'd write the date neatly across the top of the page. Then I'd write words that felt full of hope. This time, no more excuses. Everything changes now. And for a little while, I believed it. I'd read another chapter of a book, take a longer walk, answer messages I'd been avoiding. I'd catch myself thinking, maybe this is what it feels like to finally become someone new. But it never happened all at once. It happened quietly, almost invisibly. One morning, I'd leave the notebook closed. I'll write tomorrow. The coffee would get cold beside me while I stared at my laptop. I'd open the document I'd been working on, read the first paragraph, then somehow find myself standing in the kitchen 10 minutes later, washing a mug that was already clean. I wasn't avoiding the work. At least, it didn't feel like I was. It felt more like I couldn't find the part of me that knew how to begin.
The strange thing was, none of this looked dramatic from the outside. People saw me going to work, laughing at conversations, showing up when I said I would. If someone asked how life was going, I would have smiled and said, pretty good. Because how do you explain something you don't even understand yourself? How do you tell someone that the hardest part of your day was answering a text message, or pressing send on an email, or getting out of your car?
I remember one evening so clearly. I had just stopped at the grocery store on my way home. There was a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a container of strawberries sitting in the bag beside me. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine. The radio went silent. For a moment, everything was completely still. I could see my front door. The porch light had already come on. A neighbor across the street was watering flowers. Somewhere nearby, kids were laughing. Life was happening all around me. And I just sat there. My hand was still resting on the steering wheel. The grocery bag leaned against the passenger seat. I knew the milk was probably getting warm. I knew I should go inside. Nothing was stopping me. Nothing except something I couldn't explain. Minutes passed. Not because I wanted to stay there, because I couldn't make myself leave. Eventually, I picked up the groceries, walked into the house, made dinner, watched television, went to bed. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary Tuesday. But inside, I kept asking myself the same question. Why was that so hard? That wasn't the only moment. Sometimes I'd stand in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, looking at dozens of boxes, unable to choose one. Not because it mattered, because every decision somehow felt heavier than it should. Sometimes I'd type out a text message, read it 3 times, delete it, type it again, lock my phone, unlock it 5 minutes later, read the message one more time, then decide, I'll answer later. Sometimes later became tomorrow. Sometimes tomorrow never came. I told myself I needed more discipline. So I bought another planner, another notebook, downloaded another productivity app, watched another video promising to change my habits forever. Every new system filled me with hope. For a week, maybe 2. Then, somehow, I'd slowly drift back into the same patterns, the same hesitation, the same exhaustion, the same version of myself. And after enough years, I stopped trusting my own excitement. Because every time I felt hopeful, another part of me quietly whispered, "Don't get too excited. You'll end up back where you always do." I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror one morning, not brushing my teeth, not getting ready for work, just looking at myself, trying to understand why becoming someone new felt so much harder than everyone made it seem. I wasn't asking for a perfect life. I wasn't asking to become someone completely different. I just wanted to stop feeling like I was carrying an invisible weight everywhere I went. Looking back now, I think that was the loneliest part. Not repeating the same patterns, believing I was the only one who couldn't escape them. That belief stayed with me for years, until one conversation quietly changed everything. The person sitting across from me didn't tell me to think more positively. They didn't tell me to work harder. They didn't tell me I needed more confidence. Instead, they asked me one question. A question I'd never considered before. What if your nervous system isn't trying to stop you? What if it's trying to protect the only version of you it has ever known? That question followed me home. Not just that night, for weeks. I'd hear it while washing dishes, driving to work, standing in line at the grocery store, lying awake after everyone else had gone to bed. What if your nervous system isn't trying to stop you? What if it's trying to protect the only version of you it has ever known? At first, I resisted the idea. Because honestly, it sounded impossible. Why would my own body resist the very life I'd been praying for? I wanted peace. I wanted confidence. I wanted healthier relationships. I wanted to stop overthinking everything. Why would any part of me fight that? Then something happened. Not all at once. Little memories started finding me. I remembered being the person who always looked around the room before speaking. Not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, because I wanted to know how everyone else was feeling first. I remembered apologizing before I even knew whether I'd done anything wrong. Sorry became the first word out of my mouth, almost automatically. I remembered checking my phone, seeing a message, and immediately wondering, did I do something wrong? Even before I'd opened it. Those reactions happened so quickly, I never questioned them. I thought that was just my personality. Then I learned something that completely changed the way I saw myself. Your nervous system doesn't spend all day asking, what will make us happiest? It asks something much older, much quieter. What have we survived before? That one sentence made my entire life look different. Because suddenly, I wasn't seeing failure anymore. I was seeing familiarity. The hesitation, the overthinking, the constant preparing, the need to get everything right, the fear of disappointing people. Those weren't random habits. They were patterns. Patterns my body had practiced over and over and over again. until they no longer felt like choices. They felt like me. And here's what broke my heart. My nervous system wasn't protecting happiness. It wasn't protecting success. It wasn't protecting the future I dreamed about. It was protecting the version of me it believed had survived. Not because that version was better, because that version was familiar. I started thinking about how many years I'd spent trying to force myself forward, while my nervous system kept quietly asking, "Are you sure we'll be safe there?" No wonder I felt exhausted. Every time I tried to become someone new, part of me was still trying to get back home. The problem was, home had changed. My body just didn't know it yet.
Imagine moving into a beautiful new house. It's everything you've wanted. Quiet, peaceful, filled with light. But the first night, you hear every little sound. The floor creaks, the refrigerator hums, the branches tap softly against the windows. Nothing is dangerous. Everything is unfamiliar. A month later, those same sounds don't wake you anymore. Not because the house changed, because your nervous system finally learned, this place is safe. I couldn't stop thinking about that. Maybe becoming a new version of ourselves works the same way. Maybe confidence doesn't feel natural at first. Maybe peace feels strange. Maybe healthy love feels unfamiliar. Maybe resting without guilt feels almost uncomfortable. Not because those things aren't meant for us, because our nervous system hasn't lived there long enough to call it home. That's when something Neville Goddard wrote came back to me. I'd read it years before, probably more than once, but this time, it landed differently. He spoke about living from the feeling of the wish fulfilled. For years, I thought he meant pretending, thinking differently, acting differently, trying harder to believe. Now, I think he was describing something much gentler. What if living from a new identity isn't about pretending you've already changed? What if it's about patiently introducing your nervous system to a life it has never experienced before? Not forcing it, not dragging it, simply returning again and again until unfamiliar becomes familiar. For the first time, Neville's words didn't feel like pressure. They felt like compassion. Because maybe I hadn't been failing to believe. Maybe my body had simply been waiting for enough evidence to finally believe with me. And once I understood that, I stopped asking, why do I keep becoming the old version of myself? Instead, I started asking, how do I help my nervous system feel safe enough to stay with the new one? After that, I stopped trying to become someone else. Not because I'd given up, because I finally understood I wasn't fighting my mind. I was trying to convince a nervous system that had spent years protecting a life that no longer existed. And for the first time, I stopped seeing my nervous system as something standing in my way. I started seeing it as something that had been standing beside me, doing its best with an old map. Healing didn't happen the way I imagined it would. There wasn't one breakthrough, no dramatic morning where everything suddenly felt different. There wasn't a day where I looked in the mirror and thought, I finally healed. It happened so quietly, I almost missed it. One afternoon, my phone rang.
Normally, I'd let it ring once, maybe twice. I'd rehearse what I was going to say before answering. That day, I just answered it. Halfway through the conversation, I realized I hadn't rehearsed a single sentence. Another day, someone complimented my work. I smiled, said thank you, and something strange happened. I didn't argue with it. I didn't explain why they were probably wrong. I didn't spend the rest of the day wondering if they were just being nice. I simply received it. It lasted only a few seconds, but those few seconds felt different. Then there was another evening. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, reached for the grocery bag, opened the car door, walked inside. It wasn't until I was putting the milk into the refrigerator that I realized something. I hadn't sat in the car. I hadn't stared at the front door. I hadn't waited for my body to catch up. I went home. Nobody applauded. Nothing extraordinary happened. The neighbors didn't notice. The world kept turning. But standing there, holding a carton of milk, I smiled. Because I realized something had changed. Not through force, not through pressure, not because I had finally found the perfect affirmation. Something had changed because my nervous system had quietly been collecting evidence. Evidence that today wasn't yesterday. Evidence that I wasn't living in the same story anymore. Evidence that maybe this version of me was finally safe. I think that's how healing really happens. Not in the extraordinary moments, in the ordinary ones. The email you send without reading it 12 times. The boundary you keep without apologizing afterward. The peaceful weekend. Where your body doesn't spend the entire time waiting for something to go wrong. The compliment you accept. The invitation you say yes to. The difficult conversation you don't run from. Each one is so small, you could almost overlook it. But your nervous system doesn't. It remembers. Every calm experience becomes another piece of evidence. Every safe moment becomes another brick in a new foundation. Little by little, your body begins predicting something different. Not danger, not disappointment, not survival. Safety. I think this is what Neville Goddard understood in a way I couldn't appreciate before. He wasn't asking us to force ourselves into a new identity. He was inviting us to become familiar with it, to return to it again and again, until one day it no longer felt like imagination. It felt like home. Because home isn't just a place. It's a feeling your body recognizes. It's the moment your shoulders soften without you telling them to. It's taking a deep breath and realizing you weren't holding it anymore. It's laughing without wondering if you laugh too loudly. It's waking up without immediately preparing for something to go wrong. That's the kind of change that lasts. Not because you convinced your mind, because your nervous system finally believed it was safe enough to stay there. If you've been wondering why you keep becoming the old version of yourself, maybe the question was never, why can't I change? Maybe the better question is, what has my nervous system been trying to protect? Because the moment I stopped fighting myself, I started understanding myself. And understanding created something that shame never could: compassion. Not the kind of compassion that keeps you stuck, the kind that makes real change possible. Because when your body no longer feels like it's being dragged into an unfamiliar life, it slowly begins to walk there on its own. One day, you'll answer the phone without rehearsing. You'll send the email without rewriting it. You'll receive love without waiting for it to disappear. You'll rest without earning it first. And somewhere in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, you'll realize you haven't been becoming someone new at all. You've been coming home to the person you were always meant to be. If no one has ever told you this before, let me be the first. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not failing. Your nervous system has simply been trying to protect a version of you that once needed those patterns to survive. But maybe that version has carried the weight long enough. Maybe today you don't have to fight it. Maybe today you can thank it. And then, very gently, show it that it's finally safe to let go. Because we don't force the body to believe. We help the body feel safe, so belief can finally stay.